Welcome to Smash Fiction, where we pit two or more characters against one another in a battle of strength, or wits, or going so hard-boiled that you've basically turned your egg into a geode, and see who would win. This week, The Shadow versus the Phantom versus Darkman versus Dick Tracy. Yeah, hello, this is Christian, calling with a field report for the Octopus on his criminal empire. Patch me through, will ya? Boss, how are you old cephalopod? Oh, sorry, boss, I know you ain't a real octopus, but that one came up on my word-a-day calendar and I've been looking for an opportunity to use it. Right, sorry, boss. I'll get to the point. Okay, so your gambling den's in the north part of the city. I'm sorry to say, boss, that operation's deader than Jerry Garcia. Yeah, it sounds like the local PD's teamed up with some new hotshot detective in town. A cat by the name of Dick Tracy.
Wait, what year is this set? Has Jerry Garcia been born yet?
It doesn't matter.
Darkman probably also hasn't been born yet, so don't worry about it.
They've been taking out your underbosses one by one, and Tracy's come out saying he's taking the fight all the way to the top. Which, I guess will be you. Ah, well, at least you still got the extortion business going strong on the west side, right? Okay, next order of business. Oh man, I really should read ahead on this before I make with the silver lining stuff. Right, so your extortion business on the west side has been flattened like a flounder on the highway. Yeah. There's some new player in town calling himself the Shadow. Some kind of vigilante what can cloud men's minds, turn invisible, that kind of thing. Guess he's come to town with the intent to clean up the city and is gunning for you in particular. What's that? East side. Let me see here. Oh yeah, your smuggling business on the docks. Well, let's just say that I wouldn't be surprised if John McEnroe had been seen thereabouts because that racket has been smashed. Yeah, some purple-wearing do-gooder called the Phantom's been riding around on a horse, punching your guys with his skull ring-wearing fist and sticking his big old wolf on him. Not gonna lie, boss, it's not great, especially since the Phantom was last seen riding in the direction of your secret headquarters. Listen, boss, if I were you, I'd hightail it to the south end. At least there you'd... wait a second. I'm just now getting word that your drug trade on the south side has been taken down like Alex Jones's YouTube library.
What year is it?
It doesn't matter at this point.
Some stories are timeless, you know?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Some kind of shadowy master disguise with a seriously messed up face calling himself Darkman has been infiltrating your distributors down there, taking them out one by one. By the time our enforcers got the word, he'd already split the scene, but left a message in one of the drug dens that just read, "Die, Octopus, die." So I got a pretty good idea of where he's going next. I don't know what to tell you, boss. Things are looking grim. I'm gonna lay low for a while just in case the Rocketeer shows up or something, but if I were in your 8 shoes, I guess I'd be asking myself, which one of these pulp heroes will be the one to find and take down the Octopus first? That was an excellent question by Christian, and one that I couldn't answer, at least not without a good hour of nerds arguing about it first. And that's why I, Kit Mulcairn, was the private eye and judge that week. Representing the Shadow was Claire Mulcairn.
Who pones with perfect stingers in the start of episodes? The Claire pones.
Representing the Phantom was MeganBob.
Prepare to be pulped. Old jungle saying.
Representing Darkman was Dan Mulcairn.
You have been a bad boy!
And representing Dick Tracy was Miles Schneiderman.
Take the bad movies away. They scare me.
To clarify, we used each of these characters as they appeared in their respective 90s films. So it was the Alec Baldwin version of the Shadow, the Billy Zane version of the Phantom, the Warren Beatty version of Dick Tracy, and Darkman as portrayed by both Liam Neeson and Arnold Vosloo. In order to determine who went first this week, I decided to honor the antagonist of this match, the Octopus, by having each of the advocates compete to see who can pull off a task associated with the most charismatic of mollusks, the octopus. Dan had pointed out that octopuses are known for their bilateral body symmetry, and therefore he'd been emulating the octopus his whole life. I mean, he wasn't wrong, so that gave him a pretty big head start. Claire picked a fight in a bar, then squirted some ink on her foe and escaped. She just used a fountain pen, so it wasn't really a lot of ink, but it really messed up that guy's favorite shirt, so A for effort. Bob tried to predict the outcome of an upcoming soccer game, but her prediction was, quote, "I think all of the players will realize that they have a lot more in common with each other than they realize at first. After a few tense, sweaty moments on the field, their eyes will meet, their walls will fall away, and they'll slowly draw in for a tentative, tender kiss.
Yay!
The game in question did not at all go that way, but damn it, it was a beautiful dream, and send me your fix. And Miles, well, he decided to shoot for the moon. He saw a video on YouTube where an octopus escapes from a sealed jar and decided to build a life-size jar from which he would then perform a daring escape. As of the recording, he was still stuck in the jar. Thankfully, he brought his recording setup in with him, so the match can go on. And he had plenty of time to keep trying to escape, because the order was Dan, then Claire, then Bob, and then Miles from his new jar-based recording studio.
Sweet.
Your Patreon money at work, people. I remember it all like it was happening right now. Dan told me all about the many faces of Darkman.
Darkman is the hero of a nightmare version of Detroit where Robocop never died for our sins. Due to this lack of cybernetic salvation, mild-mannered scientist Peyton Westlake found himself badly burned and left for dead by nunchaku-swinging gangsters led by the villainous Durant. But Westlake didn't die. Because there was no Robocop to save him, Westlake had to find the Robocop within himself. A Robocop called Darkman. Because of the weird, radical procedures performed on him after the attack, Darkman not only is completely immune to pain, but his increased adrenaline output means that he heals incredibly quickly, has excellent aim, and has dramatically increased strength. The hospital that performed the operation on him knew about his enhanced strength and designed special restraints to keep him in place, but the second he regained consciousness, he was able to immediately and effortlessly snap these specially designed restraints and escape. They knew he was going to be superhumanly strong, but they way underestimated just how superhumanly strong. These greatly enhanced physical abilities lead to Darkman becoming a straight-up action hero. The third act of the film involves multiple goons coming after Darkman from a helicopter with automatic weapons, and inexplicably a grenade launcher with a scope? Anyway, despite the fact that Darkman is on a rooftop with basically no cover, he's able to avoid their attacks completely and lures them into his lab where he stalks them and takes them out one by one, which he then follows up by taking out the helicopter by tying it to a truck. In Darkman's final fight with Strack in the first movie, Strack knows that Darkman is by far his physical superior, and so he sets up the fight on top of a construction site 650 feet in the air. Strack has all the advantages here. He's familiar with the terrain, has multiple minions, uses Darkman's girlfriend Julie as a hostage, and even busts out a rivet gun at one point. Even with the deck so overwhelmingly stacked against him, Darkman's strength, skill, and quick thinking are still able to help him pull out a win. But don't think for a second that this Phantom of the Opera-looking mofo is all brawn and no brains. Darkman is easily the most technologically savvy character here, and not just because he's from the 90s. All the advanced tech we see him use was stuff that he designed, from his remote-controlled bombs to his photorealistic hologram projector to the extensive underground base with multiple AIs and a secret subway system. But of course, his crown jewel is his skin synthesizer, a device which allows him to create perfect, lifelike masks of a subject's face using only a single photograph. Combined with Darkman's inexplicably perfect ability to imitate a person's voice, he is ideal for infiltrating an enemy base, gathering information, and manipulating foes, before taking the entire operation down in a single surgical strike. Darkman's disguise abilities give him virtually limitless options when it comes to toppling a criminal empire. In the first film, he poses as Durant and robs a convenience store to get Durant arrested so that Darkman can attend a meeting with a drug dealer disguised as Durant. At another point, he knocks out Durant's henchman Polly, poses as Polly for a money handoff, and then takes the money and plants plane tickets in Polly's apartment. When Durant comes to Polly's apartment looking for the missing money and finds the tickets, he puts two and two together and kills Polly via defenestration. Tricking your enemy into killing their own men is the vigilante equivalent of the old "why are you hitting yourself" trick, with the added benefit of sowing intense crippling paranoia. We see in the second film that criminals discovering the face-changing Darkman is on their tail leads to them mistrusting everyone in their organization, up to and including getting into completely unmotivated fistfights with each other out of suspicion that one of them might be Darkman. He's everyone and no one. Everywhere, nowhere. Call him Robocop. I mean, Darkman. Oh, actually, what you should call him is the winner of this match, but at that point I kind of figured it was a given.
Who knows what badassness lurks in the heart of the shadow? Claire knew.
Wait, did you switch tense halfway through
you
that
totally
sentence?
did.
They protested, but I didn't listen.
Oh, Kit, that was so good.
The power of narration.
Since these are all just pulp heroes, this is a fairly low-powered match, right? Like, we got a detective with a communicator watch, a guy with marginal superhuman strength who wears different faces, a guy who punches people and rides a horse, and the Shadow. He's like a guy who turns invisible, right? If that was the case, the Shadow would be roughly on the same level of power as the other competitors in this match, but in truth, invisibility is just one potential application of the Shadow's power of mentalism. And that power of mentalism is just one tool on the Swiss Army knife of tools that are the Shadow's many powers, skills, and resources. So yeah, the Shadow can, as he puts it, cloud men's minds so they cannot see him, but he can also cloud men's minds to hide his identity, or he can cloud men's minds so that they do anything he wants. For instance, one time Lamont was having dinner with the police commissioner, and the commissioner remarked, "I'm sick of this Shadow business, his meddling in police affairs. This time tomorrow, I'll put a task force on him." And Lamont simply said, "You're not going to appoint a task force." The commissioner said, "Nah, hell with him. I'm not going to appoint a task force." Lamont then said, "You're not going to pay any attention to these reports of the Shadow. Ignore them entirely. There is no Shadow." To which the commissioner responded, "There is no Shadow." And for the rest of the movie, we never hear of this potential problem again. To call what just happened mind control is to drastically undersell it. Lamont didn't just hijack his brain for a short period of time and force him to complete a single action, he completely rewrote this dude's beliefs, desires, and priorities at a fundamental level just by speaking a handful of sentences. Like a speedrunner who knows all the tricks, just think of how many potential obstacles in this scenario this one power can entirely circumvent. You have no loyalty to the Octopus. You hate the Octopus, and you're going to tell me everything you know about him. Maybe this is the reason why all three other competitors in this match today have pretty much nothing but mundane gangsters as their arch-nemeses. But the Shadow does not. The Shadow's first big action scene features him completely clowning on a group of gangsters with Tommy guns. He doesn't even need to use his guns during this fight, but when the occasion calls for it, Lamont does have holstered a pair of big-ass twin pistols that he will fire with ruthless precision at the drop of a slouch hat. And for the record, that's as many guns as is wielded by the other three contestants in this match combined. The Shadow's nemesis is way scarier than even the Octopus himself, Shiwan Khan, the heir to the throne of Genghis Khan, who is not only a brilliant and ruthless warrior and tactician, but also a psychic on the level of Professor X, who can make people kill themselves with a simple command, transform the Shadow's love interest into an assassin programmed to kill him, or alter the perception and memories of an entire city permanently so that they cannot perceive his downtown skyscraper lair and don't remember that it exists. All the benefits of a secret lair without the commute. Not only is the Shadow by himself just as good at fighting, shooting, seducing, and investigating as all his competitors put together, but he also has a vast array of, quote, dozens of agents all over the world that help him out whenever he needs one of the few niche skills that he doesn't already possess, such as being a super scientist or being a member of the police force. We decided in preparation for this match that the Shadow has had enough time since coming to Central City to get a smaller version of his usual network up and running, befriending a few locals and giving them each one of his rings that identified them to one another as his agents. And the agents he has in the movie are no chumps. The Phantom is super rich and has a personal driver, Darkman's a scientist, Dick Tracy's a cop with a communicator watch, the Shadow is just as rich as the Phantom, and the four agents of the Shadow that we meet in the film are a driver, a scientist, a cop, and a psychic. And to add, and at this point, just cruel and egregious insult to injury to the poor and pitiful Dick Tracy, the Shadow's rings are also long-range communicators. So I'm sorry, but the one cool thing about you, which is that you have a cell phone, is also something that the Shadow and all his agents have. The Shadow towers over all his competitors in this match like an invisible skyscraper. I've been trying my hardest to think of something that any of you guys can do that the Shadow can't already do better, and pretty much the only thing I can think of that the Shadow doesn't have is a horse and a wolf? And if, for some unforeseeable reason, having access to a horse and a wolf ends up being the only way to defeat the Octopus, I'm sure that Lamont could befriend or mind control somebody who works at the zoo.
I worked at a zoo. Actually, I still do, but that's beside the point.
Did you still, in the present tense?
I did. Jeez. Bob donned her purple suit and told me a tale of a wolf, a horsey, and the Phantom.
Hello, MeganBob here bringing you the scoop on the Phantom. Don't get scared, kiddies, it's not a phantom, it's the Phantom. Definite articles are important. Now, hold on to your period-appropriate newsboy caps because you're about to learn about the pulp hero to beat. Now you might be thinking, who's this purple schmuck? Let me tell ya, he's the charming hero you need to clean up your filthy city, that's who. Kit Walker, born and raised in the jungles of Bengala. He's armed with the power of hand-to-hand, sharpshooting, a powerful skull ring, swordplay, and an outfit that says, "The last time I gave a fuck was in 1928 and I didn't much care for it." In the very beginning of the film, we see him precisely shoot the correct vine so he could swing across a canyon. But that's not all his guns are good for. He also uses them to help slide down an elevator cable. Guns! They aren't just for shooting anymore, says the Phantom. But guns aren't his only weapon. He also hand-to-hand fights 3 pirates before stealing a pontoon plane. He sword fights a bunch of other pirates, and later he explodes Xander Drax with the power of his skull ring. His fighting isn't what makes him impressive, though. He's an improviser extraordinaire who can make a plan at a moment's notice. Surrounded by baddies? Kick them down the stairs. Cornered by a baddie? Feed them to their own sharks. Chased by the police? Head for the nearest zoo. Are these plans nuttier than my grandma's peanut brittle? Absolutely. But Kit Walker pulls it off because he's the Phantom. Mid-film, the plum-colored purveyor of justice escapes from baddies into another room, instantly changes costume, hides, then chokes 2 evildoers at the same time with the power of his thighs alone. The Phantom says, "Don't skip leg day, kiddies." Not good enough for you? Tough crowd. Well, the Phantom doesn't have any problems with a tough crowd. He acquires allies like other heroes rather bafflingly acquire direct-to-video sequels.
I feel attacked.
Diana is nearly in love with him after 20 minutes with him, in which he rescues her and gets her to jump from a moving plane onto his horse. Sala is in love with him after he slaps a gun out of her hands, and by the end of the movie she goes against her boss to help the Phantom. Al, the cabbie, follows him on his run from the cops without even being asked. Even when the Phantom is in a pickle, he's cool as a cucumber because other people have his back. Did I say people? I'm sorry, also tigers. That's right. After stealing a horse and riding away from the cops, he leaps into the zoo and hides in a tiger enclosure. The tiger growls at the coppers, scaring them off. I don't want to turn this into Animal Fun Fact Hour, but tigers are a solitary species of big cat, and yet this tiger lends a paw to the Phantom. That's how good the Phantom is at winning allies. Within 2 hours of being faced with a criminal underbelly, he'll have a slew of helpers and a menagerie ready to clean up the city. Yes, I did say menagerie, because he also has Hero the Horse and Devil the Wolf. At one point, the Phantom is being held by baddies, but when Devil shows up, everyone freaks out because he's a wolf, and the Phantom is able to take his enemies out in 3 moves. When he steals a plane, he has to get word to his horse to meet up with him across the island, and for some goddamn reason, the wolf goes and barks at the horse who whinnies to say, "Can do, friend," and gallops across the island, fast enough to surpass a plane. I don't know what kind of mystical animal powers the Phantom has, but they are enough to overcome the language barrier between man, wolf, and horse. I'm running out of time here in this commercial break, and your regularly scheduled episode of Palmolive Beauty Box Theater is about to start. So I'll just say that he has the stamina to cling to the outside of a plane for over 8 hours. He's tenacious enough to wipe away the grime of evil, loving enough to win the hearts of animals, and proud enough to wear pants so tight that we all know exactly what caliber his weapon is. We salute you, Phantom!
Bob was my favorite radio personality back in the day, but that's beside the point because then Miles showed me his dick, Tracy.
Your Honor, Dick Tracy is...
Miles?
Citizens of Smash Fiction, it is I, the Batman.
Yeah.
I can hear you wondering, why would Batman knock Miles unconscious and take over the role of advocating for Dick Tracy himself? There are 2 reasons. First, Miles has been talking shit about me for like 4 years. He thought he would get away with it. They all think they'll get away with it. They're always wrong. Second, I am also an early 20th century pulp hero. I know these men. I know their strengths. I know their weaknesses. I am the only person here qualified to tell you about them. The Batman is here to ensure that justice is served. You might normally expect me to take the side of one of these other characters. One more like me. One of the guys wearing masks, perhaps. Or one of the rich kids with secret identities. You'd be wrong. I wear the mask, true, but that's only because, despite all my amazing qualities of awesomeness, Despite everything I've done for Gotham City, I'm not as brave as Dick Tracy. Nor are any of these other pulp heroes. Of all these men, Tracy is the only one fearless enough to fight crime wearing his true face, using his true name. He is as fearless as he is incorruptible. You think all it takes to fight crime is a fancy costume, a taste for scientific invention, and a trust fund? I thought so too, once. But then I met Dick Tracy, and I learned that what really matters when everything else is gone is rock-solid principles and a sense of purpose. He is the man I always wanted to be, but never had the courage to become. Dick Tracy has something that none of the others have. Balls. He fights crime with nothing but a badge, a gun, a clean right hook, and a bright yellow hat and coat that screams his whereabouts to every piece of criminal scum in the city.
I will say, I think we can pretty much confirm that the Phantom has balls based on his outfit.
I will allow it. The Batman acknowledges that point. And what kind of criminal scum are these? What kind of city is this? In Dick Tracy's city, even the lowliest thug looks like his face went through a washing machine that uses acid instead of water. It's like Deadpool and the Joker found the Wonder Twin rings and took the form of a skin disease. And might I add, unlike anyone else in this match, Dick Tracy actually fights organized crime. I mean, at least the Shadow takes on the descendant of Genghis Khan and some Mongol warriors. Phantom and Darkman are literally like, look how awesome I am. I beat up the chairman of the board. Tracy is the only one with actual experience bringing down an entire crime syndicate. Only his mobsters are also deformed mutants. Also, in this match, the participants are up against the Octopus, a criminal mastermind who never shows his face. Which one of these characters has successfully defeated the machinations of a criminal mastermind who never shows their face? Bingo. I can already hear you crying, like the little non-Batman crybabies that I can only assume that you are, given your association with Miles. Tracy doesn't actually do anything in the movie except throw the only enjoyable part of it off a ledge. He gets rescued by his friends, bailed out by his coworkers. He doesn't even get to shoot the ultimate bad guy himself. None of you understand. Tracy has friends, not servants. Not a network of people who have been told they owe him one. Real, actual friends. Everywhere he goes, he inspires loyalty. His partners at the police station help him even after he's been framed. The kid he rescues at the beginning of the movie becomes instantly invaluable. At the end of the film, the criminal mastermind mentioned earlier by the Batman is more than capable of shooting him, but she doesn't. Why? Because she's in love with him. And she's not even the love interest of the movie. There's a whole other one of those. I know this sounds weird coming from me, but you can't win this match by being a loner or just by meeting a girl. You win with community. Even the Batman joined the Justice League. So yeah, Dick Tracy isn't going to have any competition from Captain Cultural Appropriation, Dollar Store Danny Rand, or less interesting Swamp Thing. Anyway, I can see Miles starting to stir over there, so I'm going to take off and figure out what to do to him next time. Hopefully, with this head start I've given him, he can take it from here. Think carefully about what I said tonight, Your Honor. And if you start having any doubts, remember, I'm Batman.
Bye, Batman. Big fan.
Bye. Miles, are you okay?
Oh, Jesus. What the fuck was that?
Do you need a minute?
Yeah, is it time for my opening? It's honestly, all I had written down here is he has a watch. That's basically.
Those opening rounds were pulpier than Florida's natural 100% premium Florida orange juice. But then, it was time for the rebooties. And Darkman was up first. Everyone piled on him. It was awful, but kind of funny, too.
Darkman is the Daniel Day-Lewis of pulp heroes, trying to impersonate other people, and it takes so much time, and he has to practice so much. You're not trying to win an Academy Award. You're just trying to deal with your opponent, which you could do without spending all that time.
I mean, I don't think it takes him that long to perfect an impression. Like, you know, in the times when we actually see him practicing, usually he just has to, like, listen to them saying one phrase, and then he practices it 3 times, and on the 3rd time, he has an identical voice to them. It does not take him long.
It's uncanny.
To master an impression. It's very, very fast.
Yeah, he kind of sucks at fighting. You were like talking a big game about his superhuman strength, and ostensibly he has it, but he doesn't really ever do anything that impressive in the strength department. And in terms of his agility, it's kind of subhuman. In his, like, a lot of the chase scenes, he just kind of does an awkward, like, jogging waddle. And, like, in his fight scene with the guy in the unfinished skyscraper, when the guy has the rivet gun, the only reason that he kills him is because the guy's monologuing. You make it seem like he was, like, kicking his ass and doing great, but he pins Darkman to the wall and then just, like, walks up to him and is monologuing. And so Darkman, you know, pulls his hand out through the rivet because he doesn't feel pain, obviously. But, like, the guy could have shot him in the head and killed him if he was, like, had any interest in doing it.
Well, first of all, I mean, given that we're going up against what's essentially a low-key supervillain, I do think a fair amount of monologuing is to be expected. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but I kind of feel like each one of us has cashed in on an opponent's tendency to monologue at various points in times. I remember that Genghis Khan dude talking a lot in the shadow, so, you know, there's that sort of thing. But, like, there's this much better-known pulp hero who's not in this match called the Spectre, and, like, one hilarious thing about him in his earlier appearances is that anytime he would run up against a situation that his powers couldn't handle, this magic ring would spontaneously appear on his hand, which would grant him whatever power he needed in, like, this mind-boggling anticlimax. And I kind of feel like Darkman's rage works the same way, where it's just like the plot inevitably puts him in this area or in, like, a spot that he shouldn't be able to overcome, and then there's just, like, that weird montage of, like, volcanoes erupted and babies screaming and stuff, and then he just becomes the Hulk. You know, even if he ends in a situation that he normally wouldn't be able to handle, he's just gonna get mad and then it's problem solved.
I just want to point out that Darkman does not have a watch.
That's a really good point, Miles, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a real tactical disadvantage on his part, because he's not going to know what time it is. He'll go undercover in disguise, you know, and he'll overhear, like, what time some secret criminal meeting is taking place, but he has no way of knowing when that actually is. He doesn't know how to plan his route, you know, he doesn't know how to do anything. He does not have a watch, Dan. How do you answer this charge?
Miles, there's a good point you can make about him and his management of time that we could talk about. That is a legitimate point I have written down, but you know what? Fine.
Well, that's not what we're talking about. Well, he doesn't have a watch per se. He does have a stopwatch, though, which he uses to monitor the lifespan of his disguises. So I will grant you, when it comes, strictly speaking, to tracking the precise hour and minute of the day, I think Tracy, and I will say this in all humility, I think Tracy has the edge there. But
thank you.
Darkman is at least number 2 on the list in terms of precisely tracking when things are happening due to gadgetry that he carries around. So
can't use it to communicate, though. Let's point that out.
Next on the rebuttal's chopping block was the Shadow. And you know Claire tried her damn best to cloud the minds of her opponents.
The Shadow, you only use your psychic powers on Jonathan Winters. You don't use them on anybody else. Even though you have them.
Is that the commissioner?
Yes.
He uses different psychic powers on different people from time to time. You're right that he doesn't Jedi mind trick that often, but he still can do it and has done it. And minus that power, he would still be good, but he also does mind trick. You're right, he doesn't always solve all of his problems that way. He probably could, but we wouldn't have a movie then. So
you know what? Narrative point. I'll take that.
Yeah, so maybe he won't use it every time that he could, but he will use it sometimes, and every time he uses it will be busted.
So, Claire, you made the claim that, like, because the Shadow has some scientists in his network, that he's on the same scientific level as Darkman. The scientist that the Shadow recruits in that film is a very run-of-the-mill geologist. There is no way, even with this network, that he's going to be able to command super science in the way that Darkman does. Like, maybe he finds a demolitionist who can make bombs, which is arguably the least of Darkman's scientific skills, but you're not going to find someone who can make completely realistic holograms or perfect disguises or any of the many other devices that Darkman just comes up with as needed. Like, all of his tech is beyond what science is capable of today.
First of all, he only does the hologram thing in his base that one time, as far as I know. He doesn't have like a good portable version of it. But anyway, the geologist guy who he meets, actually, I don't remember exactly what the scientific breakthrough that they come up with is, but it is some like dumb BS super science stuff. It's about some like theoretical material, and he like goes off on this thing like, well, if this material truly does exist, then the way you have to deal with it is X. I don't remember what the thing is, but it's like, he's like a theoretical geologist. It's like, he's on like the cutting edge of super geology, I think. So, I mean, like, by the standards of pulp, I do think he was the equivalent to a Darkman of his time.
So, Claire, I definitely take your point about the Shadow's communication system. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that he definitely owns a watch. But the fact that he doesn't have the communication system is not in the watch,
yeah,
I feel like is going to be a real issue.
That's true. You know, Miles, I'll do you one better. I don't know if we see him wearing a watch. I could be wrong.
I mean, he's a rich guy. I kind of assume he does, but like,
it's probably like
you
a
know
status symbol. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe he eschews them. In which case, how can you cloud the minds of men when you don't have at your disposal the most devious construct of humanity, which is the concept of time?
That's you know, I don't really know what I have to say about that. Yeah, he does have rings that let him communicate with all of his agents, you know, all around the city, no matter where they are, so they can coordinate tactics and exchange information and stuff like that. Like, they have that, but you're right. He doesn't have a watch.
Yeah, that's
that
true.
we've seen.
Not have a watch.
He might have one, but it's not in the same device as his communicator.
I was beginning to actually think maybe Dick Tracy is going to win this. But then it was the Phantom's turn. I told the advocates I would give 5 extra kit points to anyone who could get Bob to say hooves.
Phantom's kind of a dummy sometimes. Like, he's like good at punching stuff, but like when he's in the cage with the tiger and like the cops, he's hiding out from the cops. If he had waited like a second longer, the cops would have walked away, but he jumped out of the cage when they were still there and they saw him getting out of the cage. And then it started the chase all over again. So his whole thing with the tiger didn't accomplish anything. Or like when he was in the museum and he wanted to get the thing from behind the glass, he just breaks the glass when there's a bunch of people around and you think like, oh, that's cool. That's a bold move. But like the main bad guy's right behind him and they like pull out a bunch of guns and take the device take the thing away from him. Like, he could have like, is the main bad guy in the room standing right behind me before I break this case open? You know what I mean? Like, he's just kind of a dummy.
Okay. About the tiger thing, I'm going to say he was being respectful of the tiger's space. And that's how you keep your allies. Secondly, it's not like if he hadn't punched through it, it would have changed the fact that Xander Drax had come to get the skull. That would in no way have altered that scenario. So him punching it made no difference. It just looked cool, and that's fine.
That's a weird reverse Casanova fallacy. Because it would have been messed up anyway, the fact that he did a dumb thing doesn't change that.
You know, Bob, Claire was willing to give you that the Phantom is good at punching. I am not. The Phantom loses a fist fight to a normal dude, while that normal dude is also using one hand to drive a truck. How dare you? It was the beginning of the film. More importantly, I just want to say, it makes him approachable. Is that not what you want in a pulp hero? Is that not what's going to clean up this fucking wrecked city? You want a hero you can get a beer with, probably.
I mean, Bob, do you know what I want in a hero? Because let me tell you, of all the poor, sad, watchless bastards in this match. Like, does Kit Walker even understand time? He grew up in a cave. Did anybody teach him? Is he have a different, like, concept of it? Like, culturally? Is he maybe going to be, like, out of sync with the crooks looking at their own, you know, stylishly stolen watches in Central City? You know, his circumstances of birth, his circumstances of childhood put him kind of at a disadvantage, and I feel bad for him, but the fact remains he has no watch.
Miles, he has the world's first watch, the sun and moon.
Oh, son of a bitch.
He can read the environment he is in and know what time it is.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Then, it was the last round of rebooties. Dick Tracy's coat was water resistant, but it wasn't quite built to handle a storm of bullshit.
Dick, you're too much of a romantic. You couldn't imagine that maybe Madonna's character, who definitely did have a name that I've forgotten, that she might not be on the level, but you didn't, because you thought with your dick and also your heart, but your dick too.
So, when Dick Tracy was in the movie, there was this whole plot thread going on about, like, how he wanted Madonna to testify and everything. And as we got toward the end of the film, as he is wont to do, Dick Tracy looked at his watch. And he was like, well, there's not enough time left in this movie to squeeze in a, like, betrayal, it was Madonna the whole time storyline. That makes no sense. So, like, I'm not going to say the watch failed him, because the watch was telling the truth, as it always does, but I don't think any of these characters, or indeed any person with a logical and sound mind, would have seen that one coming, because it was stupid.
You know, you've got me there. It was pretty stupid.
Dick Tracy's incredibly laissez-faire about everything, like solving the case, his own survival. Like, he just kind of goes with the flow. Like, what's gonna happen is what's gonna happen. There's like the time where he gets captured by the bad guys and tied to the chair when he's in the room with like the boiler that's gonna explode, and he just like sits in the chair, like not trying to escape until the kid comes and like, you know, rescues him, and his like feet aren't tied. He could have like tried to get out of the there's like any number of things he could have done, but when the people come for him after with like the drive-by, he just like lets him go, and the kid's like, let's go after him, and he's like, nah, we'll get him eventually, it's cool. Like, and I noticed, by the way, every time you see that it's night in the movie, the full moon's out. It happens 4 times. So this movie takes place over the course of at least 4 months for him to catch the bad guys, I will say.
You know, when you're a character as powerful and as competent as Dick Tracy, you just don't need to worry about that kind of stuff all the time. Like, when you have a watch that you can speak into, and in doing so, I can only assume, actually communicate with the very concept of time. You already know what's going to happen. You know how this is all going to play out. You don't have to be worried about it. You know, time binds lesser men. You know, they say that humans are ruled by the hours of the day. Not so Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy is the master of time. He is a time lord, if you will. As we can see by the fact that he's got a sweet watch. What you're seeing, Claire, is just the confidence, the quiet confidence of a man who knows he has nothing to worry about because that watch is also a communicator.
As an actual cop, Dick Tracy is really the only one here who has to think about policy and procedure and collecting evidence and obtaining a warrant. I get that his way will be better when it comes to taking the Octopus to trial once all of this is said and done, but for the purposes of this match, it's really only going to slow him down here in the moment when it comes to tracking him down and taking him in.
I don't know if you watched that movie, Dan, but the movie begins with Dick Tracy being like, hey, we're gonna break the rules again for the 6th straight time. Like, he doesn't really care about that. You don't really care about that thing. He's got a watch! I don't know what else I have to explain to you. Like, the watch is already a tell-all. He doesn't have to worry about procedure. That's why he keeps trying to bring Al Pacino in.
Is the watch just tell time, Miles? Is that all that it does, though?
No, it's also a communicator.
Oh, it does that, too?
Yes! I know it's hard to believe.
All 4 pulp heroes closed in on a quaint little suburban home, but the sky wasn't so quaint that night. Thunder boomed above the 4 as they walked past the little white picket fence, and when the sky lit up, I just knew they had walked right into the lightning round. When the men of mystery stepped onto the front porch, they were inexplicably changed into boys of mystery. Seriously, all 4 of them were preteens, right down to the tween clothing they were all suddenly wearing. Then, the door opened. A lady, a real mom type, looked over the 4 kids with a smile and a little bit of masked relief. Oh, there you are. I was starting to get worried you had all canceled. You in the purple shirt. You must be Kit, the Walker's boy? And Richie. Never without your yellow jacket, as always. Oh, I almost forgot. Your mother mentioned you go by Dick now, right? Monty Cranston. You never leave home without your red scarf, do you? You boys really have a commitment to your respective color schemes. Oh, and who is... Oh, Peyton. I couldn't see your face very well under all those bandages. Is that what the kids are into these days? Anyway, come on in. Let's get the slumber party started. The boys entered the suburban home and were led to the living room where the TV had already been set up to an SNES.
What year is it? Someone, for the love of God.
Having a watch would really fix that problem.
It would.
Hey kid, you know what you really need? Is a watch.
On the TV stand were a pile of videotapes, and on the floor nearby sat a stack of board games. The couch had extra pillows and blankets for use in making a pillow fort, and the coffee table was covered in several different brands of chips. Some of the bags had been opened and were being snacked on by 4 different children, each of whom were wearing the signature purple and 3-striped gloves of the Octopus. It was obvious this was some kind of strange trap set up by the Master of Disguise himself. One of the kids was the Octopus, but which one? It was up to the kid detectives to figure out which child was the guy they'd been after. But they had to play it cool, or else their parents would be called and they'd get taken home. And the octopus would slip through their fingers again. Kinda like a real octopus, because they're very slimy and they don't have any bones. But I digress. Or, I did digress. I don't even know anymore. How did each kid use their various slumber party surroundings to ferret out the criminal? Little Dick Tracy was the first to throw his hat into the ring.
Dick Tracy, in order to find out which one of these children is in fact his deadly nemesis, the Octopus, is going to utilize one of the time-honored traditions of slumber parties everywhere, the walkie-talkie. So all the kids are going to get walkie-talkies, and we're going to play the game where like everybody runs all over the house, like pretending to be like spies and everything, you know. Dick Tracy is going to make sure that he's on his own, but that he always knows where the other kids are. And the reason he knows, of course, is because his watch is like tuned into all the walkie-talkies, right? So even when the other kids are like only talking to each other, and even when they don't think they have the walkie-talkie turned on at all, he can monitor them through the watch.
He's like Alexa.
Yes, he's in keeping with our unknown era of the setting. He is the surveillance state. So he knows where everybody is. He knows what they're talking about, even when they don't mean for anybody else to know. And because his watch is so perfectly tuned to the time, to the proper time, and because he knows how to read it and how to use it to best advantage, which none of these other people do, by the way, he can track their comings and goings, which room they're in, how long they're separated from the group, and, like, even when the walkie-talkie party comes to an end, like, you guys know how this works, like, people hang on to the walkie-talkies, like, the whole summer party, you know what I mean? So you just, like, have fun with it every once in a while. And as a result of him being able to monitor communications and monitor the time, the two things that he cares most about, he is going to be able to triangulate the identity, figure out which one is acting suspicious, and moving for the kill.
Oh no!
Then, little Kit the Phantom Walker stopped playing with the family dog long enough to get back on the case.
You know, that's exactly what's happening. Kit's not really worrying about it too much. Kit's just sort of ambling around, investigating, looking at things. And the thing is, though, he's going to flash that Kit Walker smile. And then one of the kids is going to go, wow, he seems so cool. And even though it's an octopus kid, we're going to call this kid Mollusk. Even though Mollusk knows, I'm in the octopus gang, but I want to be near this other kid because he's so cool. And Kit's nice. So it's slow at first. They just sit next to each other while they're playing Super Nintendo. Later on, because Kit is so generous, much like he shared those jewels with Al, he's going to share some top shelf candy with Mollusk. So they're going to go in the backyard and put Pop Rocks in their mouth and then drink Coke. And then whenever their mouth gets all fizzy and then they end up having Coke all over themselves, they're going to go, fantastic slumber party thing. The octopus is going to see this and go, oh, I can't have this. And it's going to start to make a move and try and take Kit out. And Mollusk is going to go, no! And then throw a net on top of the octopus. It's just a blanket. And then
they just cut holes out of.
Yeah, exactly. They really ruined one of their mom's blankets to capture the octopus. And Kit's gonna go, oh, that's the octopus, and then leap on top of this now benetted octopus and grab him up in his now net and get him on the back of his horse, which is in the backyard because didn't want to be separated from him, and cart him off to justice, and then come back for the rest of the slumber party.
After Monty the Shadow Cranston unclouded his own mind with soda and candy, he set out to cloud the minds of his fellow slumber party goers.
In his investigations, the Shadow has learned some things about the octopus, namely that he's a really, ostentatious, over-the-top dresser. He likes a lot of costumes, and he's seen like some photos of him. He knows that he has these, when he grows up at least, he's going to have these tattoos on his face that look like tears, like 4 that come out of each eye that kind of also look like tentacles. And he also is a bald dude with a really intense stare all the time and looks exactly like Samuel L. Jackson. And he doesn't have a photo of the octopus as an adult, but when going through the video cabinet, he does find, we'll go with a VHS copy of Snakes on a Plane, just to confuse the timeline even more. And he's like, oh, that's a close enough reference. He can't really tell looking at the people there because they're all just kids and, who can tell? So he decides, you know what, we're going to all do dress up, get a bunch of clothes out and see who picks the most over-the-top outfits. And he still can't quite tell. So he was like, oh, we're also going to do makeup. So he gives people a bunch of eyeliner. So everybody puts on eyeliner. And as they're doing it, he also sets up in the room a hair straightener that he just turns on, and he has like a blow dryer he just turns on, and there's like a George Foreman grill he plugs in and turns that on, so just to heat up the room a lot. And as they're they're dressing up, suddenly all of the eyeliner they have starts running down their face, and then he takes the VHS copy of Snakes on a Plane and draws the little tattoos onto the face of the guy on the front, and is like holding it up and comparing it to everyone. And by doing that, he's able to figure out which one is the octopus.
Genius.
Last to act was little Peyton Darkman Westlake. The bandages on his hands were stained orange with Cheetos dust, and he was thirsty for justice. And just plain thirsty because Cheetos.
So he's Dark Boy right now. in this young state. And what he realizes is, if he needs to figure out which of these people is the octopus and which ones are just fall guys, essentially, he realizes that what fall guys are there for is to kind of like take the blame for whatever the octopus is being accused of. They say, oh yes, I was the one who did that. I'm responsible. Take me away to jail or whatever. And Dark Boy realizes that he can use this instinct against them. So when no one is looking, he finds one of those like really creepy, almost life-size American Girl dolls and puts a mask of his own face over the doll. And then like puts a hat on her head and then just like sits her up on the couch so that everyone thinks that he's still there. He's just changed into a very pretty turn of the century dress. And then he sneaks around to the house next door and uses their phone to call the house where the slumber party is happening. And when the mom picks up, he imitates the voice of the octopus's mom. It doesn't actually have to be the octopus's mom, because I doubt that the mom hosting this party actually knows what this voice sounds like, but he can, do a very accurate impression of like a middle-aged woman. So the mom, upon hearing what Dark Boy says, leans into the room where all the other kids are and says, Octopus, your mother is saying that you left your hemorrhoid medication at home. And, all the 4 kids that are all claiming to be the octopus are like, oh yes, that does sound like me. Yep, that was definitely me leaving my hemorrhoid medication. Oh, and your mom is also saying she needs to bring you your big boy diapers, just in case you have another accident like last time. And again, all the kids are like, yep, that's gonna have to happen. And it keeps on going, oh, you need your special pimple cream, or I forgot to bring enough waterproof ponchos for all your friends just in case you end up projectile vomiting again. And they just keep piling up embarrassing situation on embarrassing situation. And again, all the fall guys are doing their duty and accepting what's being said, but the real octopus cannot take his reputation being dragged like this until eventually he stands up and declares, no, that is not true, and I know that because I am the octopus. At which point, Dark Boy drops down from the ceiling and tackles him.
It was at this point that I decided to leave and really mull this over, though I was quite sure that Dick Tracy was going to take this one.
Absolutely.
I have to ask Claire, this was your baby, right?
Yes.
Okay, how did you end up gestating this creation? Had you seen all of these? What was the process?
I had only seen a couple of them. I can't remember if this came first or if it just like reaffirmed me in my belief that this was a thing. Was the podcast Movie Fighters actually did a few of these and discussed
that makes sense.
And discussed briefly the concept that, hey, it was weird that in the 90s they just did a bunch of old pulp characters as movies. Like, Batman 80, the one from 89 was a hit, and then people rather than thinking like, hey, maybe people like superheroes. They're like, you know what? I bet people like things from the 30s.
Yeah. Like, people really like old detective stories from the fucking Depression. the casts of all of these are very, very interesting.
Yeah, oftentimes far too good for these movies. But...
Oh, yeah, and then also, like, super weird, like, fucking Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat randomly shows up at the end of The Phantom.
There were 2 Mortal Kombat alums in The Phantom.
Yeah, I know.
I was delighted by Dustin Hoffman's character in Dick Tracy, though.
How the fuck did that movie get that cast?
I don't understand
How did that happen? And then to get that cast and to completely whiff on the main casting, the title character.
I know.
Yeah. Most things about it are pretty good, like the kind of production design and the sets and all that stuff's great, but just like the writing and the acting are just kind of...
From a technical standpoint, it's an amazing film.
Can I tell you my favorite dumb thing about The Shadow?
Please.
The movie. I really enjoyed the fact that Shiwan Khan says that he is the last descendant of Genghis Khan, a man famous for having very few descendants.
Yeah, I and 0.5% of the entire population of the planet are the last remaining descendants of Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
I was watching that movie and I was going like, I just assumed it was going to be fucking like actual Genghis Khan. He's like, oh no, I'm a descendant. I'm like, what?
I know, when they revealed that it was like the sarcophagus of Genghis Khan, I was like, oh, please let the villain of this movie be a psychic Genghis Khan. That would be incredible. What baffled me about Darkman is the one that has like these direct-to-video sequels that came out. And obviously they couldn't get Liam Neeson to come back for those, so they got Arnold Vosloo instead, a man who apparently makes his career on wearing bandages on screen. But like for the flashback stuff, they reshot some of the scenes from the original Darkman with Arnold Vosloo. And I'm like, this is a guy who can change his face.
Yeah, seriously.
They even have the perfect thing at the end where in the last shot, he's played by Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
Make him Bruce Campbell in the sequels. It would have been great.
You cowards.
I'm just like, why are you reshooting this with Arnold Vosloo? Just say that he's changed his face. And, oh, man. I love how, like, Darkman's power, his actual real power, is this accent that just keeps slipping further and further away from American the longer it goes. Hey listeners, this is Editor Dan stepping in. We ended up having a lot to say about these films, and after we recorded this match, we sat down and recorded a brief but in-depth and very fun chat where we dive into some of our thoughts about them. It's a good time, and if you're interested in hearing it, we're going to be putting it up on our Patreon page, free to everyone, whether you're a patron or not. So go check it out. Thanks.
I had returned, and I had changed my mind. Perhaps unsurprisingly. At first, I was concerned that Batman had given Miles a concussion so severe that current medical and psychiatric science would be unable to help him. But then I realized that Miles had achieved the not giving a fuck about winning Nirvana, and I was happy for him. Because Dick Tracy did not capture the Octopus. He did, however, know exactly what time it was when the Octopus was finally put away by Darkman.
Oh, shit.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
The advocates then congratulated Dan on his win and congratulated Miles for becoming the new bodhisattva of no fucks.
Dan, you did it.
Oh, man. Well,
I don't know how, but you did it.
I have no information on how that was achieved, but it happened, and I'm pleased for you.
I'm pleased too, mainly because I had so much fun recording with you guys, and yeah, thanks all. This is a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this one.
It was, in fact, then time for the kid thanks.
Oh.
I went over to Twitter and thanked Florian, Robert Ramsey, Jeff Rick Present, Fortibody, Just Jake Flagrantly Fake, Sid Rabbit,
What year is it?
Earth Mofo, The Shattered Worlds RPG Podcast, Vladimir Duran, The Pop Culture Failure Podcast, Icon Jade, CJ, Matias Tatimez, Cool Down Now, Sean Boyd, Cosplay Devotee, and 3 owls in a star-spangled bikini. So we at least knew that it was July. Then I went to Tumbles and thanked Gone Wittershins and Sid Rabbit Blog. Also, Sarah Lelegram said she re-listened to the Phantom vs. Sweeting episode and she needs more musical episodes. I finally went to Facebook and thanked Robert Ramsey and Jeff Polier.
And then I came into the present tense and said, thanks to Christian, who was our featured patron for this match. And because of Christian's contributions, Christian was transformed into the Octopus's, I guess, switchboard operator / bringer of bad news. So, I mean, probably not a job that's going to offer you a lot of security. I'd probably suggest updating your LinkedIn profile, but, at least you got worked into our storyline. And you, the listener, can as well. All sorts of stuff over at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Hey, listeners, Editor Dan again. Forgot to mention this during the recording, but one of the other things that patrons get is the ability to vote on matches like this one. This was voted on as the match that our $5 and up patrons most wanted us to do. Apparently, you guys really enjoy when we do these ridiculous 4-way matches because you've voted in a couple of them in a row so far. But we're happy to do them because we know that you will enjoy them. So if you want your voice to be heard, patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast is the place to go.
I thanked all of our listeners for getting to this point. I was shocked you didn't just delete the episode and the whole podcast from your feed. Next week was Extraordinary League.
Oh, no.
And after that was Doc Brown and Marty McFly versus the T-1000. Did you get ready for it? Who knows?
Are we in the present yet? Can we get to the present tense?
Smash Fiction is produced by Dan Mulcairn, with logo design by Claire Mulcairn.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod at Incompetech.com for our theme song, Hitman.
You can find us on Twitter at SmashFicPodcast and search for the Smash Fiction Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and if you leave us a good review, we shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Smash Fiction is made possible thanks to our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Please consider donating as little as $1 each month. It helps us keep the show going, and we have great rewards and extra content for those who help us out.
If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other contributions, send them to us at smashfictionpodcast@gmail.com and help us continue the fight.
Sorry, Claire. You know I have to put, I have to do weird, tense things with my openers. So that's not Dan. That was all me.
That's your thing now. You're not the animal lover anymore. You're the person who can't stick to the present time.
Nope.
Yeah, no, she
it.
did a present tense second person narration for that lightning battle we did.
Yeah.
So
I recall.
Now I gotta find whole new tenses to talk with.